So I'm going to spend some time with you this morning talking about quick ways you can make your content more accessible and inclusive, and by doing so, you will make the world a better place, I promise. I am Allison Manley. I'm the director of marketing at a small web agency called Canopy Studios. I'm also a very proud Ravenswood mom. And you will not know it to look at me, but I was actually born disabled. It was corrected with surgery. I had a problem with my hips that thankfully was corrected, but it meant that I spent the first 2 years of my life in and out of full body casts from the rib cage down. That because at the rate that babies grow was constantly changed, so I was in and out of hospitals a lot. And then I actually learned how to walk that way until I realized it was way more efficient once the cast was off to walk with my legs one in front of the other. And thankfully it has not impacted me too much longer in my later life. There are some impacts, but it has been very made aware to me my entire life how it could have been if the surgery was not successful. So I have a very keen awareness for the needs of those who don't have access the way that I do. I also had a father who was an ophthalmologist, so we had lots of interesting and grotesque conversations around the dinner table around various eye diseases and things that were caught in eyeballs, and he would talk a lot about blindness and strabismus and cataracts and things of that nature. And I thankfully have many, many LGBTQ friends and family that I love and support, so I want to make the world more inclusive for them as well. And the agency that I work in works very hard to make sure that everything that we put online is as accessible and inclusive as possible so it reaches a greater audience. So, these are the 5 main areas I'm going to talk about today. The great news about all of these is that it requires no special training, no coding, no special design skills on anyone's part to improve all this when you're posting online. You just need to know some tips and tricks. So, here we go. All of us are content creators, all of us. Even if you don't think that you're writing a lot or putting a lot of blog posts out there, you're still taking photos, you are posting videos, TikTok, Snapchat, it's all content, all of it. If you're writing a paper for school, it's seen by very few people. It might be seen by your parents, it might be seen by your teachers, but you're not necessarily posting that online. However, when you do post something online, now it can be accessed by everybody. So the point here I'm trying to make is that I want you to ensure it's accessible as possible so it reaches the widest audience possible. So what is the difference between accessibility and inclusivity? One is sort of an umbrella for the other. Accessibility is really the designing of the systems to optimize the access so that you can ensure that everyone, regardless of age or ability or even location, what device they're using, can access your content. Inclusivity is more the larger umbrella and makes you want to give equal access to everyone wherever possible and asks you to consider the content itself. I just want to put this out here. I will repeat this again. Please don't post a photo or a video of anyone without their consent. Not everybody likes their face online for any number of reasons, so please ask their permission first before you post it. So I have questions for everyone here. Who here has ever broken a bone? Who here has ever gotten laryngitis? Great. Who here has ever been on a very crowded bus or a train, you're trying to watch a video and you forgot your headphones? Okay. So there are many kinds of disabilities. There are the permanent ones that you can imagine: blindness, you've lost a limb, perhaps you're dyslexic. But then you also have temporary disabilities. That's where you have injured your wrist. You've got laryngitis. All of a sudden, you've lost the ability to speak temporarily. Then there's also situational disabilities. What if you're just really overloaded that day? You've got a lot going on, your brain's a little fuzzy, you could be sick, and you're just having trouble reading a book because your eyes are hurting. So there's many types of disabilities out there in the world. 26% of US adults are actually permanently disabled. That is a full quarter of US adults in the United States. Fewer kids are permanently disabled, 4.3%, but most of that is cognitive disabilities. So my question to you is, can you imagine the total number of people at any given time, kids, adults alike, who are disabled due to a permanent, a temporary, or a situational disability at any given time? You can't put a number on that. It's a lot, a lot. So this is why we want to make sure that when we're posting something, we are thinking of everybody at that time, because it truly helps everyone, not those who are just permanently disabled. So let's talk about what makes content online accessible in the first place. Well, you've got to accommodate visual needs. You need to make it easy to see. You've got to accommodate motor needs, make it easy to interact. That's when, you're using your mobile phone and your thumb is, struggling to find the right spot. You want to accommodate those auditory needs, make it easy to hear. And then, of course, the cognitive needs and making it easy to understand. How do we do it? I mean, some of the kids here might be thinking, I don't even have a website yet. How does this apply to me? But it does. Let's talk about images and photos. There is something you'll see called alternative text, shortened to alt text. And what it is that it is a way for those who are using screen readers and assistive technology to understand what the photo is about. It gives a short, sweet description, and it's typically invisible to those who are sighted and don't need the description, but it does surface when that assisted technology is used. So this is a photo of a Ravenswood class out on the playground out back. I've added some alt text down here just to give some context, so that when that is being read by a screen reader, the person on the other end understands, oh, it's a photo of a bunch of students gathered around on top of some climbing equipment. They're smiling at the camera. You have to turn this on. All social media apps provide options to add alt text and captions, but they're not necessarily enabled by default. So you do have to go into your apps, turn this on, so that every time you post a photo, you can add the alt text yourself. These are both dead bugs. Here's where it gets interesting. You want to provide context to your alt text, because someone who is listening to the assistive technology read this off can conjure up many images. They can conjure up this dead bug or that dead bug. So let's make sure we give them the context that one is a dead fly lying on its side. Its body is an iridescent green and gold. The other one is a very rusted Volkswagen Beetle in a junkyard. You really want to be like NASA. Now, NASA is amazing at alt text. If you're ever curious, go into their Twitter feed, because you will see that last summer they had this incredible, Webb telescope that showed us some amazing pictures of the universe. And then this woman over here noted, wow, NASA did an incredible job with this image description. It's very long. It goes into detail about the blackness of the universe and the types of images you're seeing. You do not have to be this detailed, but I do applaud NASA for it. I really do. So to sum it up, just give context. Context is key. You don't have to go crazy with a very long description. A short few words is fine. If you are starting to get interested in assistive technology, please don't use it for alt text, because it's rarely correct, at least as of right now. And believe it or not, you can actually avoid saying the words picture of or image of, because that's redundant. If the screen reader is screening that, it already is acknowledging that it's an image. Another thing I'd like to point out about our images is the use of color. There is such thing as color blindness, especially with red and green color blindness. You'll see this article here where there was a photo of when the Bills met the Jets. One team wore red, the other team wore green, and any fan who was struggling with red and green color blindness couldn't tell which team was which. So just something to think about, since 2.2 billion people do live globally with some sort of vision impairment, that when you're using color on your images or even in your text, just think about the colors you're using. All right, let's talk about videos. There's really just one quick tip I want you to use when you're doing videos. Please remember this, because 85% of video is actually watched without sound these days. That's that situation where we're on that busy bus, right? We want to watch something real quick, or we're in a doctor's office, we want to be quiet, maybe the library, you've forgotten your headphones, right? If the captions are provided, you can still enjoy the video. So please turn on the captions. Bonus points if you provide a transcript to your video. Moving on, social media. So this is my favorite part of the talk, because this is where we get to accidentally murder celebrities. But let's talk first about emoticons. Emoticons are fun. We enjoy them. We love using them. They're also read individually by a screen reader, every single one. So that makes it a little tough for the person listening to the assistive technology to try to understand what's being said. So all I ask you to do is if you use emoticons, save them until the end. So speaking of Cher, back in 2013, she was accidentally murdered by the use of a very bad hashtag. For those who are in the audience or a little younger than me, there are a few of you out there. Cher is an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony-winning actress, singer, producer, amazing person all around. This is Margaret Thatcher. She was the Prime Minister of England for a very long time, incredibly influential in her own way. And in 2013, Margaret Thatcher died, and this hashtag trended globally, sending millions and millions of Cher fans around the globe into a tizzy thinking that Cher had died because it was not properly capitalized. The words were not properly capitalized. So, Cher is very much alive and with us, thankfully. Margaret Thatcher sadly has passed away, but no capitalization in that hashtag caused confusion. So what I'm going to ask you to do is when you're using hashtags, please capitalize the first letter of each word. If it's obviously one word and it cannot possibly be misconstrued, please feel free to not capitalize that word, but be careful because some words can be split into two words. So is it nowhere or now here? Two very different meanings. So something to be aware of. Another thing I want to talk about when using social media is digital blackface. Unfortunately, because GIFs are now so prevalent and are a thing, there is now something called digital blackface where people who are not of color use funny or sarcastic, ironic GIFs of people of color to make their point. It is frowned upon, so I will just ask you that if you are not a person of color, please do not use GIFs of people of color for your enjoyment. All right, moving on to inclusive language online. There is, unfortunately, a lot of language in the English language that is baked in that we want to be careful of using. But what I do like about our language is our flexibility with pronouns. My pronouns are she, her. If you are in doubt of someone's gender or you just want to be polite, which I highly recommend, please ask and just say, hey, my name's Allison, my pronouns are she, her. What are yours? What's your name? And that gives them an opening if they wish to engage in that way. So something to think about on pronouns. But let's talk about the etymology of our English language. There is a lot of language baked in that unfortunately is a holdover from decades and decades, sometimes centuries, that it's time to get out. The grandfather clause is a fine example. That clause, that phrase, actually comes from the 1800s when there were some laws passed that were excluding black men from voting. So that's something that I have worked very hard to get out of my own vocabulary. I now use the term legacy instead of grandfathered. There's a lot of other examples of racist and colonial language. Gypped is a big one. Indian giver. My company does keep a list online of substitutions. You know, instead of using this problematic language, please use the substituted language instead. Let's talk about knowledge gatekeeping language. This one is when you say, oh, you can't figure this out? It's so easy. How does that make the other person feel? There's also a lot of gendered language. I go to a lot of conferences in my role, and when people say to me, who's manning the booth? You know, we try to say staff the booth, because there's a lot of women that work the booth as well. Ableist language is one. Whew. So I grew up in the 1980s, and all the time I look back and I think of all the times I said, that's so lame. You know, that's something I've tried to extract from my language. Violent language. How many times have I said, oh, I'm going to take a stab at it, or I'm going to pull the trigger on this? Something to think about. Now we get to my other bigger pet peeve, which is forms. I have to fill out a lot of forms in my life. So please, if you're designing a form, don't ask for more than what I really need to fill out. Do you really need my address? Do you really need my birthday? Do you really? So this woman here, she points out that every time she has to fill out a form, she's annoyed that she has to choose Miss Mrs., Ms. from all the options, which gives away her marital status. But a man in the same situation just has to choose Mr. He doesn't have to make that distinction. So she's asking for updated forms. I agree with her. Account for all types of names. Billions of people on this planet have names with 2 letters. Billions. They're trying to just buy something off your website and they can't check out because your form says you have, like, 2 letters isn't enough. Your form is saying, nope, I don't recognize this last name as valid. What about hyphenated names? She's trying to register at the dentist office and can't because her son's last name is hyphenated and the 9-year-old recognizes this is not progressive. Let me fill out a form. What if you're Irish? This form literally tells her, we don't think this is a valid first name. And she said, I definitely didn't. We think you might have mistyped your name. I definitely didn't. This Irish person responds, I hear you. I understand this pain. Let's also account for all genders, going back to the pronouns. Forms these days should not just only have male or female as an option. They just shouldn't. It's a little bit better if you include I prefer not to say, but try to give more options and be more inclusive than that. Or better yet, if you don't really need to know their gender, don't ask. All right, so I'm going to wrap it all up now. Let's just try to be more inclusive with how we're dealing with our content online, because I really want you to consider how your content represents you. Everything you put out there is going to follow you for life. The internet is forever. So everything that you're putting out there really does represent you. And if you make a mistake, we all do, it's okay. Last year, Lizzo released an amazing album. I enjoy listening to it a lot. It unfortunately had an ableist word in it that made a lot of her disabled fans very upset. Lizzo apologized, changed the lyric, re-released the album, done and done, forgiven and beloved, all by the fans all over again. She owned up to her mistake and fixed it. So if you make a mistake, it's okay, apologize and move on. I'm going to repeat it again. Don't post a photo or a video of anyone without their permission. And here's the good news, and I want to congratulate you all that if you have done just one of these things that I recommend, the next time you go post something online, you have made the world a better place. Congratulations. You've made it a little more accessible or inclusive for someone else out there. I want to thank you for your time. Appreciate it.